unified. I mean, I've said this to leaders both in the Islamic and Arab world and to the world in general. This is a third world war by other means. This brings Muslims, Christians, other religions together in this generational fight that all of us have to be this together. So it's not a Western fight. This is a fight inside of Islam where everybody comes together against these outlaws, so to speak.
Welcome into Hour 2 of America's Forum with Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth here, and that was the King of Jordan, Abdullah, heard on CNN this weekend.
Yeah, Abdullah calling ISIS, quote, outlaws of Islam.
Joining us now, Van Hipp, author of the new book, The New Terrorism and How to Defeat It.
Van, this isn't the first time we've heard about Jordan's King Abdullah addressing the threat of ISIS in no uncertain terms. Should our president take a page out of Jordan's book?
Absolutely. I first met King Abdullah almost 20 years ago when he commanded Jordan's Special Forces. And let me tell you, he's the real deal. He's a leader. He gets it. And I think this is an opportunity for the United States to seize the moment. When we have, and by the way, he is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Who better than King Abdullah with a strong military background, the Arab leader who, in my opinion, understands the West better than anyone else in the Middle East? Who better than King Abdullah on behalf of moderate and reformed Muslims to take the fight to radical Islam? This is a unique opportunity for the United States to stand with King Abdullah.
Van, in the news this morning, Iraq with this military operation to take back Tikrit from ISIS. As we take a look, we see the city is on the road to Mosul and northwest of Baghdad on the Tigris. It is also the hometown of Saddam Hussein. So a victory here would be very important symbolically, but also strategically, would it not?
It would, and what I see this, J.D., as is sort of a test run for the upcoming fight and battle with in Mosul. And there are some reports today that that's been delayed. We've got about 27,000, the Iraqis have about 27,000 troops who are and will be engaged in that fight in Tikrit. But again, I see this as kind of a test case to see what works, what doesn't work, for the really big battle that's coming up in Mosul. And you're right, it's 80 miles north of Baghdad, pretty sizable city, 260,000 people, and it's on the road to Mosul.
Van, Speaker John Boehner weighed in on the fight against ISIS. Let's take a listen to what he had to say and get your response.
They're barbarians, and we're over there kind of poking them in the nose. We're not really there to defeat and destroy them. We don't have a plan that will do that.
If you were advising the president, what would you do?
Somebody's boots have to be on the ground.
So, what do you think, Van? Are those boots going to have to belong to the United States soldiers in order to win this fight?
I think we've got 6 Arab countries, moderate Arab countries, who are engaged to some degree right now in the fight. This is an opportunity for the United States. Do we need to be with them? Yes. One thing we learned from history, at the end of the day, it does take that grunt on the ground to finish the job. However, had we listened to our top ground commander, General Lloyd Austin, in 2010, when we had 90% of ISIS's predecessor organization's capability, 90% or so wiped out, and General Austin just wanted to leave a small residual force to make sure it did not reconstitute itself. Had the president listened to his CENTCOM commander, I don't think we would be having this conversation today. So we can defeat ISIS. We can defeat radical Islam. The key, though, is do we have the right systems in place to make sure that it does not reconstitute itself?
And Van, about a minute 30 remains. I want to return to something you mentioned in passing, and that was the unprecedented statement out of the Pentagon that the Iraqis would launch an assault on Mosul this spring. So they telegraphed the punch, and I believe this is without precedent at the Pentagon. You served there. You can tell me the ins and outs of that unique location. But do you think this back off is this new announcement, is that to try and somehow reclassify the information they've already put out there? What do you make of that on again, off again announcement? About a minute, sir.
JD, I can't figure it out. I don't know where some of these folks learned military tactics, but what I learned years ago is you don't telegraph to your enemy what you're going to do. So looks like they're trying to put it back in. But the key is, now we know that they are going to attack Mosul. That makes sense. You want to win, and you want to win decisively, and I think they want to make sure that the Iraqi force is prepared, and I think that's why you're seeing what you're seeing in Tikrit today, to see how that goes and learn lessons from Tikrit before they go to Mosul.
Well, Van, you've got this new book, The New Terrorism, and we want to talk more about that when we return here, Van, specifically what's going on in terms of social media, what's going on in terms of recruiting people from the West, including the United States, and a curious occurrence this weekend on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, talking ISIS on SNL. It didn't really go over too well for many people.
Well, maybe you classify it on the try to laugh to keep from crying, but it's a serious situation. We'll discuss it more with Van Hipp as America's Forum continues here.
Hey, Dad.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You got it, kiddo. Looks like your ride's here. Take care of her. Death to America.
That Saturday Night Live sketch has sparked some outrage. The spoof, you may recall that Super Bowl car commercial with a twist at the end as a young woman, instead of joining our military, joins ISIS. Let's continue our conversation with my old friend Van Hipp, author of the new book, The New Terrorism, How to Fight It and Defeat It. Van, you are live from New York this morning at Newsmax New York. Your take on this, I guess in a sense, satire mirrors society, but this notion of Americans going to take up the cause of ISIS. What do you make of it, and how do we stop it?
Well, I don't think that mirrors society, J.D. And you know, with all the money that Saturday Night Live has got, you would have thought they would have at least had a focus group to gauge the reaction of the American people. The American people and the grassroots get it. There's nothing humorous about this at all. When radical Islamists are beheading people, threatening our way of life, and they have an active recruitment campaign for young people. And this is right out of the radical Islamist playbook.
Van, I'll tell you, the co-founder of Twitter doesn't find anything funny. Apparently, there are alleged threats from ISIS since Twitter has taken steps to get ISIS out of its service. Mindful of what ISIS has done in social media, do you believe Twitter and other social media sites will, in essence, suppress ISIS, or will they cower in the wake of threats?
Well, I hope they have some guts and some backbone. Don't forget that Jihadi John has a degree in computer programming from Westminster University in Great Britain. So this is a much more sophisticated radical Islamist group, particularly in terms of technology, than we've seen before. And one of the things, J.D., I talk about in my book is that technology and social media, all these things are changing so rapidly, and they're good. The problem is our government is so stovepipe and takes so long to analyze and adapt and respond that as the technology changes, it's almost as if the threats increase exponentially. And that's the real challenge for this country in terms of getting ahead of it and thwarting the next terrorist attack.
Van, I made mention of the fact that you are no stranger to the halls of power at the Pentagon. Let's just say that there was a Secretary Van Hipp advising this president instead of Ashton Carter. If you were advising our Commander-in-Chief today in the 2.5 minutes that remain, how to take a new fight to this new terrorism, what would your priorities be?
I would listen to my ground commanders. I would define the threat for what it is, radical Islam. I would have the Pentagon share new sensor technology with Customs and Border Patrol to better secure our borders. I would institute a situational awareness hotline with real analytical tools so that people could text in real-time photos of suspicious activity. We could put it all together, connect the dots, and respond. That would address the soft target scenario. I would reverse the decision to cut the United States Army to pre-World War II levels. That sends the wrong message to all the bad guys, not just the radical Islamists, but to Putin. I would do those kinds of things. I would also institute a program to reward moderate and reform Muslims for coming to bring forward actionable intelligence in this country. Don't forget the mosque that we in Fairfax, Virginia, JD, where Nad al-Malik Hassan went, and where al-Awlaki was the imam. 2 or 3 of the 9/11 hijackers were there. What if just one person had come forward? Think of the terrorist attacks we could have thwarted. We've got to get out. So we have to think outside the box so that we can prevent the next terrorist attack on this country.
Well, I would hope that those who aspire to the Republican nomination for the presidency listen to you, because they would hear a clear and concise and compelling plan of action in terms of waging this new kind of fight against this new kind of terror. Van, I'd be remiss in the minute that remains not to get your assessment of this man I mentioned in passing, our new Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter. Your take on who he is and how he'll serve this president.
JD, I actually mentioned him in the book, and in a good way. In 2006, he co-authored an op-ed in the Washington Post where he was concerned that then President George W. Bush might not be tough enough against the North Koreans and their missile and nuclear threat from North Korea. Let's hope he hasn't changed from 2006, and let's hope this president listens to him. But some of the things he said in the past are pretty good. The problem is, President Obama is now on his 4th Secretary of Defense.
That is problematic. Van Hipp, author of the new book, The New Terrorism, How to Fight It and Defeat It. Van's an old friend from my days in Washington. I appreciate him joining us today. And listen now, for more on the terror threat that ISIS represents and the rise to power of this organization, go to newsmax.com/terror threat. And while you're there, you can get the book Rise of ISIS, a threat we can't ignore, for a deeply discounted price, plus a special report from Newsmax.com, Losing the War on Terror Free. That's newsmax.com/terror threat.